This is an interview in the series Women Around the World, a mosaic of feminine impressions and inspiration in times of Corona. My name is Cécile Masson. I'm coach and host and the author of Rose Letters of Love to Life. I have the pleasure to share this virtual space with Dorian Baroni. Welcome, Dorian.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you so much. So, Dorian, you are a leadership coach and you are the founder of Women Agents of Change. Just tell me a little bit more about your activities.
Let's see. Well, as you said, I am called upon by leaders and their teams to help them in organizational settings with either team dynamics or individual professional growth, but always at the heart of it, there's personal transformation and growth. And for the last 4 years now, I have started up gently, but with determination, this online resource hub for women who want to transform either themselves and their teams, or themselves and the systems they inhabit. And it's called Women Agents of Change. And it was inspired by the work I had done previously in a series of programs called Coming Into Your Own, which is a global women's leadership program, which is very much about finding one's center. And I thought to myself, once we found our center, then what? How can we continue to grow and develop and have impact and agency in the world? So that's what I'm up to at this stage in my life.
Wow, it sounds really exciting. And obviously, we've met at several occasions in these settings as well.
Yes.
So that's why I felt, I'm really happy you're here. But how does COVID-19 affect or impact on you personally at this time?
Well, my heart is heavy with the just the sadness of seeing so many people's lives directly affected. So that I have a sense of the grief that is rolling around the world due to this virus. And I'm also, though, emboldened in spirit to imagine how might we respond non-reactively going forward. So how do we stop ourselves, individually or collectively, to just work out of habit, out of threat brain? And how might we both attend to the pragmatic needs that are being highlighted by this virus and the way it's working through our systems, through our societies, but also the possibilities that are also within it. So that's how I'm feeling right now, which means that depending on the day, I'm either, or the moment, I'm either emotionally drained or emboldened or called to action or frustrated. So it's been quite the range.
Frustrated is obviously quite a strong feeling. And how do you cope with that? Because you might not be the only one being frustrated in these times. How do you manage this frustration?
Yeah. Well, the good news is that I've been training all my life for this. So I do believe in the statement that we were made for these times. And that, in fact, we are each made for the times in which we live, whether we acknowledge that or not. So I take heart in reminding myself that I can weather this and I can learn from it and grow from it, and not to let myself wallow in too much sadness or frustration or despair, depending on the moment. And I resource myself with a number of just tiny practices to come back to questions of what are the possibilities, the bigger, larger possibilities that intellectually and emotionally draw me forward into optimism, and then what are the pragmatic, smallest next steps I can take, whether it's just taking 60 seconds to breathe, whether it's writing an email to a friend who I haven't heard from in a long time, just to feel the connection, taking a walk, applying some self-compassion, whatever it might take.
How do you do that? Applying self-compassion. This sounds really exciting.
So it's based on the great work of Kristen Neff, and Nilisha Wickramasinghe, who was a colleague of mine, who taught me a great deal about this idea and practice, which is to remind ourselves that we must care for ourselves and acknowledge the joy, the pain, the hurt, whatever may show up as natural. It's occurring. So it's not to try to ignore it. But if it hurts, to sort of give ourselves a little hug, metaphorically, and say, it's okay, you know, it does hurt. This is not easy. And also to remind ourselves that this is a sign of our common humanity, that there are others out there who also are probably feeling this way in this moment, and that we are not alone, whether we feel lonely or not. We're definitely not alone. And then mindfulness practices, whether it's the breath, whether it's yoga, whether it's just pausing and feeling one's body on the earth. Just a little bit of mindfulness practice can make a big difference, an embodied practice.
So people who are not that used to these kind of practices as you are, and being leaders in the world of politics or economics, do these practices come easily, or is there a challenge there that really, especially in these times, to actually get into a certain new kind of practice or routine? What is your experience on that?
Well, it's a bit of a paradox. I think what I experience, and when I'm coaching leaders or people of all walks of life who are in the midst of this pandemic, the part of us that feels unsafe will be quite active, because it is a period of feeling unsafe. It's natural for us to feel that way. So in those times, it is really demanding and difficult to engage in new practices. It's almost the worst of times to do that. On the other hand, there is no better time to try some small new practices, to feel the difference, because the emotions are so intense, because the numbness sometimes is so intense. When we can access a bit of ease or a bit of calm in the midst of it, it's very obvious. So it's, on the one hand, hard to access and to get into the new habit. On the other hand, when you get a little taste of it, it's really evident that it's a different state of being. So people then may find it easier to give themselves permission to try it out. Because what else is there to do other than feeling constantly stressed or overwhelmed or in constant motion?
So what you're saying is, it's not like self-indulgent, I'm going to do a kind of practice, but it really serves a greater purpose for
Absolutely.
the individual, but possibly also for the team that might be involved around
everybody around you. Yes.
Around
yes.
you. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, in the days before we had travel bans and we would get on airplanes, we were reminded at the start of every flight, in case of turbulence, put on your own oxygen mask first in order to then help others. And this is very much the case with leadership. It is not self-indulgent to grow our capacity for resilience, because it's that very capacity for resilience that is a generous gift to others. So yes, a little self-indulgence perhaps in the moment, but it has positive ramifications for everyone else as well.
You were earlier on, you were talking about the feminine leadership program called Coming Into Your Own. And now you're talking about resilience.
Yes.
That program, obviously, we share it as well, but maybe you could share a little bit in how much it could inform female leaders in this time to really access these different archetypes and leadership archetypes as well. If you don't mind sharing just a little bit about that.
I think one of the gifts there are many gifts to the Coming Into Your Own program, and I encourage anyone who's not attended a retreat, when we can again retreat face-to-face, to do so, or find online equivalents. But I think one of the gifts that is most prevalent in my mind right now in these days is the quadrated leadership model that is at the heart of the Coming Into Your Own program, and so many cutting edge leadership programs. And for me, the 4 archetypes, the sovereign, warrior, lover, magician, are examples of how to, in your day-to-day and in your person, manage polarities. And especially in these times, it's so easy to go into one polarity, one extreme that is your home base, that you know how to react out of. And yet, sustainable, systemic solutions are never coming out of one polarity. It's always an and. So for example, how can we be emotionally feeling the intensity of the pain that COVID is bringing, Corona is bringing around the world, and at the same time detach enough so as to see the potential actions or different ways of thinking about things that could ease that pain, that emotional overload. Or if we're in action mode, reacting, trying to put things in place, trying to bring aid, writing checks, making masks, how can we step into the sovereign? If we're in warrior action, how can we step into the polarity of sovereign, where inspiration and the sense of this is all going to be okay resides at the same time? And I think that is one of the gifts of the Coming Into Your Own program. It invites us into a model of wholeness that is not about one archetype versus another, but it's how can we embrace the full range of each.
Would that mean that you start actually also a dialogue, an inner dialogue and an outer dialogue that will be informed as well from 4 different stands?
Yeah, I think it starts with the sort of the inner acknowledgement that any one reaction to the current level of crisis is a natural, well-meaning reaction. And then to invite in a dialogue in oneself and with others to help everyone sort of bring their truth to the table and see how do we step out of reaction into creativity, and how do we bring the best of our various lenses, our various predispositions to the issue at hand. So not judging one as the enlightened way to react and the other one the not so enlightened, but to actually see, yes, you need both. You need optimism and you need realism. You need action and you need reflection. You need big picture and you need very little picture, very small detail.
Yes, and the sensing that you were saying earlier on as well, isn't it? In the lover archetype, where you really also deal with what is going on. As you were saying earlier on, I feel frustrated. That will be definitely one of the sensing that you do, which informs you physically as well, that there is some kind of feeling going on there.
Yes. Yeah. What is your heart telling you?
Exactly.
And then what is your mind able to tell you? And how do those two dance together?
Yeah. So
and what does your body tell you and your spirit?
Yes. And obviously this quadrant is one approach. You were earlier on saying as well that it helps to also to access that more systemic view on things. So from a systemic point of view, looking at it more globally, you work on a international global level.
Yeah.
Do you see patterns emerge of action, but also of hope around Corona, of an aftermath of Corona crisis that invites us to live differently with Corona, possibly for many years to come?
I think, the questions that are really awake for me are, how will this time of lockdown have given us new insights and awareness of the power of nature, the positive power of nature? From everything from people taking a daily walk to get out, realizing how important it is to get access to some air and some sunlight and some parks and flora, to the fact that because there's less human activity, cities are glowing in a lack of pollution, and ozone layers may actually be benefiting from this lack of human activity. So how to stay remembering that when there were less people running around, manufacturing and driving and doing things, the world was healing at a natural level, in some specific ways. I think the world of work will change dramatically after everyone has experienced the power of being able, if they are able, to work at a distance, that they don't have to live in particular urban centers and drive to work or commute to work, that they actually can leverage this new technology that is available to us, just like you and I are doing right now.
Absolutely.
But it also, I think, point out that there are essential jobs and industries in urban settings and beyond where people don't have the luxury of working remotely from home, where they are critical to the survival of civilization as we know it, and they're often the most underpaid and undervalued sectors of our society. So I think that is becoming so blatantly clear to all the rest of us who have the luxury of locking down at home, that grocery store clerks and nurses and bus drivers and truck drivers and farmers and people who manufacture the foods that we eat, they're not sitting at home working remotely. They're actually, they are the base, the foundational essential base that we rely on every day without even noticing it. So I think that to me would be a way to sort of, that work will need to be reimagined, and the value of work might need to be reimagined. And then I think this, how men and women relate at home, I think, is shifting as couples are at home with children and realizing that they both work, the children are at home with both of them, who takes on the bulk of the child caring and house caring duties. That is becoming apparent to many couples that I've talked to. So I think the nature of actually coupledom is being perhaps reevaluated.
So parenthood is being evaluated, but also the work as being distributed and valued, as you were justly saying, is being evaluated or looked at in any case, and it becomes more apparent. Also because in many jobs that are less paid generally, many women are also involved. So in how far do you notice that from a women agents of change perspective, that this is actually a theme that is buzzing as well?
I think the voices of women, the voices of women are so needed in these sorts of pandemics, as such as this one, recognizing that women have a particular set of roles that they have played traditionally and continue to play, and insights that have not been paid attention to. And then quite pragmatically, the majority of nurses around the world are women, and in many societies, the majority of doctors are women. And so our healthcare system is relying on women actually taking care of us during this crisis. There are ways that women's roles are shifting: service work, teachers, caretaking. So many of the roles are being highlighted that are actually held by women. And then the disparity in economics, in sort of financial levels, is starting to be highlighted. That this crisis will impact those who are less fortunate much more. And that when you look at our societies in general, women have been underpaid and are often supporting families on much lower salary levels.
Dorian, you were saying that women have other kind of insights. Could you give an example of the kind of insights that you're noticing that strikes you that women have them more easily than men? Is there an example you can give?
Well, the thing that I've noticed just in some of the coaching clients I have and their spouses is that the women seem to be tapping into almost ancestral threads of resilience that allow them to stop and be in lockdown and not find that as constraining as men are feeling. So the world of action and activity and outside the home has been traditionally such the place where men have found their meaning making, that when they are cut off from that, they appear to be not suffering more, but at a loss as to how to reshape their identity during these times.
Reshape their identity.
Reshape their identity, yeah.
Okay, so they lose who they are and how they should
Yes.
behave.
There is some of that happening, yes. Whereas I anecdotally just seem to find that the women have a deeper sense of how to get still and accept what is and be in it and find some creative expressions within it and not solely focus on what's missing, what's not accessible, what's not doable or not possible. And I think that is a capacity that women bring, not just at these times. I think it's showing up in these times, but it's always there. It's just been undervalued.
Are there other patterns that you observe that are showing up really strongly at this moment that you notice?
Well, I'm noticing the kind of the clash of two big world views around what is economic strength. So we have been told that some of our countries were economically developed and had very strong economies. We've heard that in the news for several years now. And all it took was 100 days of a virus to highlight how fragile our economies actually are. How so many people don't have a livelihood right now from one day to the next. Mm-hmm. And how our healthcare system is not geared to addressing that equitably in all countries. So I think there's a big desire to go back to the status quo, go back to that growth, go back to that robust stock market. And at the same time, there's a whole other set of dynamics saying, was it in fact robust? Or was it all a house of cards? And this 100 days of virus is showing that.
It's
I don't have the answer.
How
but
fragile it all is, and
how paper thin,
artificial, you name it. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So obviously, you've said several times you work with leaders. What are the changes you really would like to see and possibly also co-facilitate for after Corona crisis time?
I think it's not something that I would create or make happen, but I think it will. I believe that there will be an acceleration of the focus on purpose-driven leadership. So there already was, for many years now, a gathering of forces around what is the purpose of work? What is the purpose of me as a leader or as a team member? How do I find my purpose? If I am working, how do I tap into those unique gifts that have been given to me? There was a movement already afoot to look at that. And I think that will be emboldened. Because if people don't fall back asleep after a crisis, they will come out of it realizing that during the crisis, they paid much more attention to what mattered. And that some things that they thought were really important on December 31st of 2019 aren't actually that important in the face of a real challenge. So I'm hopeful that we will individually and collectively look much more at how to be purpose-driven in our organizational settings, in our societies, and in our lives. That is one of the main things that I think might come out of all this.
So purpose also in the sense of having a personal fulfillment of the job you do, not only for leaders, but for everybody involved.
For everybody.
For everybody, really.
For everybody, yes. So even, I mean, I think right now, grocery store clerks that check us out at the store when we're given, the 1 hour to go and shop. They're not just grocery store clerks. They are helping us feel safe and cared for, and they're doing their job regardless of this concern around transmittability of the disease. And that's enormous. I mean, they could choose to just stay home and not come into work every day, but they're doing it for us. And because, of course, they need an income, but I think there's an acknowledgement suddenly that these roles that we looked at in many parts of our society as blue collar, let's call them that, are essential, are absolutely essential. And we all owe them a huge deal.
It makes me think of the crisis, obviously, in another country that is dear to you, that is Italy, when the people that were collecting the rubbish bins were not active. There
Yes.
It was already highlighted in Napoli.
Yes.
It's the same kind of, really, yes, if these people wouldn't go out and do their jobs in wherever sector that is vital for society, we couldn't just stay home and relax and be out of the virus zones.
Absolutely. And I think that immediacy and pragmatism and rawness that we see in these moments should translate to the same questions for any of us who are in more service-oriented or professional capacities, to ask, why are we doing this work? Whose lives are we altering for the better by showing up every day and doing our thing? Not just ours, but and not just our families, but who else?
From a gender perspective, Dorian, if you look at it, we've just talked about the relationship in the homes, we looked at the relationship at work. How do you think there could be a different kind of dialogue starting between men and women as of now, directly within the crisis, but also in the aftermath?
I don't know that please go ahead.
How could a woman or a man engage in a different kind of conversation to be in a self-esteem or purpose-driven stand in relation to the other gender?
I don't have a clear answer on that. I think it's more a question. I have clear questions. I guess I'm in a period of inquiry.
Okay.
So I have questions around, in the past, there was sort of this mythology that there was a life at home, and then there was a life at work. And the persona that showed up at work was slightly different than the persona that showed up at home. Now, suddenly, with so many people working from home, and even on the news, watching journalists trying to make their news shows work while they're calling in from various locations around the world with unreliable communications software, there's an equalizing of, or a shredding of this veil between home and work. Suddenly you see the journalists who you've seen every day, very put together, makeup, hair, talking from cue cards and sounding otherworldly, is now at home. Hair slightly askew, lighting not so great, child running around in the background. So it's making us all much more human in some ways. And I wonder if that will shift expectations and dynamics of power, of what power looks like.
And possibly also that incredibly emphasized sense of perfection, of which many young people are actually suffering, because all they see on social media is perfect, and it's been makeup and whatever. And now it's all being, oh gosh, he's got not perfect hair and whatever, just what you were saying earlier on.
Yes.
So also that
it's humanized. It's humanizing us.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
So it's drive to perfection is possibly getting less as well. We can
Absolutely.
be relaxing into life again. Yes.
And so those are the questions, you know, some of those questions. I see teams meeting on Zoom or other Skype, and they're all calling in from home, and they're doing their work remotely. They're having team meetings, and people can see each other's homes, and for the first time in many cases, like they see little slices of the home life and personal objects, and it's shifting hierarchy and kind of structures of division and separation. So I wonder how much that will impact the relationship between men and women, and what leadership looks like, what assertive looks like, what leadership presence and charisma, you know, all these questions that have been actually created in this manufactured environment of the office,
Mm-hmm.
which is not usually a normal environment. It's very much a fabricated set. It's almost like a theater piece. And I think that veil is being shifted.
So
And then having men and women at home with their children, I think that is going to call into question for many couples division of labor. Like, who takes care of the dishes? Who takes care of the kid when they need homeschooling? Who's on the teleconference when? And negotiating anew family relationships, you know, if there is a couple working.
when I listen to you like this, it looks like there is an enormous potential for life getting back into work as well.
Yes,
Finding
I
a
think.
just balance between life and work within life, rather than life within work, kind of shift. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
And also, I think the camaraderie of having to go through a crisis like this, you know, these are times that are crucible moments for every single person out there, whether they're directly impacted or not. And so it's hard to let go of that bonding, that care that we've made it together through this.
Yes.
After it's over.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
relationships will shift in their tone, I think.
Yeah, and relationships are maintained even on a distance because of technology. So, obviously, this conversation without this technology could not have happened.
Right.
So,
Yes.
across the ocean. Yes. I'm going to ask you a very typical coaching question, but if you
Yes.
had a magic wand, what would you like to create in an instant for the world to change?
That's a big question. I would say, how can you stay curious? How can you stay hopeful? And how can you let go of old answers? That's the three things that would come to mind.
How can you let go of old answers? To finish this conversation, Dorian, is there anything you would like to add?
Nothing that I can think of in the moment. It feels like such a gift to have been asked these questions by you, so I want to thank you for that. And I guess the wish I have for anybody who might be watching this in the future or listening to some portion of our conversation is an encouragement to continue to trust that each of us will find our ease, our clarity, and our know-how in these times of change. That we have been here before as humans, and we have continued to flourish. And this will be, I think, the question for the era to come is, how do we flourish for the good of everyone coming out of this?
Dorian, thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you for asking very much.
Thank you.